Bills went down in Week 10, but can they rebound in Week 11? And Dallas plays Minnesota, which could be a trap spread. We'll talk about that Thursday Night Football and the best bets of the week on the Huddle, presented by OddsChecker. Welcome, everyone. I'm Pat Mayo, joined as always by Pam Maldonado, Brian Matthews, and Ross Tucker. I want to jump directly into Thursday Night Football because it features one of the most interesting teams at the moment. Probably not both of the most interesting teams. One of the most interesting teams. That's the Green Bay Packers, trailing by 14 in the fourth quarter against the Dallas Cowboys. Everyone was just ready to cash those Dallas tickets that apparently everyone had. Didn't happen. Packers stormed back, went in overtime, and now they get to play on Thursday Night Football. They're 2.5-point favorites. This got up as high as 3.5 at some point, hosting the Tennessee Titans, who doesn't really seem to matter who they play. Good team, bad team. They're just going to play the same game over and over and play the level of that team. So, Pam, I want to ask you, where are you leaning here? Is this an overreaction to one win from the Packers?
For me, it's not, because a couple of weeks ago we had the same conversation, right? Who do we believe is more inclined to have a bounce back into the season? And I was one of the ones that chose the Packers, that I wasn't as down on them as probably others. And I think that this game for me against Dallas was a potential turning point for the Green Bay offense. You had running back Aaron Jones. It was his second game in his last three where he rushed for over 100 yards. Aaron Rodgers looked like his old self, Aaron Rodgers. He maybe finally have found his go-to receiver with Christian Watson, 107 yards on 4 receptions. I don't know if you remember, but it was in week 1 where he dropped that pass against the Vikings. And it was like ever since then, Rodgers ripped the cord real quick and said, no, you're not going to be a receiver anymore. Well, maybe what we saw in this matchup was Rodgers needed to trust his receivers. And now maybe he finally trusts Watson a little bit. So for Thursday Night Football, I know that King Henry is going to get all the rave because this rushing defense for the Packers. But I'm still inclined to believe that the Aaron Rodgers passing offense is where it's at. I like Aaron Rodgers in this spot. Packers -3 for me.
Well, and what's interesting about it to me is, remember, we were wondering the same thing about the Bucs when they played against the Rams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brady had that late touchdown drive for the Bucs to win it, and we were wondering, is it just a one-game, end-of-the-game Brady drive, or does this mean more? Well, in their game against Seattle over in Germany, it kind of felt like it meant more for the Bucs. So I'm going to lean towards the Packers getting the momentum from that win over the Cowboys and it carrying over, especially against an offensively challenged Titans team that has to go on the road on a Thursday night. Short week games, typically not great for the road team going up to Green Bay. I love Mike Vrabel. I love the way the Titans play. But it's interesting. I think over 3, I would lean Tennessee. Under 3, I would lean Green Bay. Right at 3, it's a no play for me. If anything, I'd say, though, Green Bay, with the belief that maybe they carry that momentum from a huge comeback against the Cowboys. They had never lost, had the Cowboys in the fourth quarter when they were up by 14 points. But I had the Cowboys -5, so of course they had to do that.
Hey, I'm going to agree with both of them here. If it were more than 3, I'd probably look the other way because Tennessee just has the tendency of playing every team tight. But if the Packers actually come out and establish the run with Aaron Jones, which they did against Buffalo, didn't do against Detroit, and then did last week, and then mix in the pass, I think they've got a good chance here to come out. I think 3 points is fair. The momentum aspect of it, like Ross said, looking at Tampa Bay, I like the momentum. I think it gives them something, a little more skin in the game. They've just been losing nonstop, and now they have a chance to kind of make a little run at whatever it might be here.
Mm-hmm. Worth noting, over the past month, the Dallas Cowboys, per DVOA, have the 25th ranked defense. Not what you would expect, because when you look at the whole year, it's still inside the top 10. But the past month, they've been let down a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. Conversely, after starting out pretty slow, the Titans are top 5 in the last month against the run and the pass. So they do play these slogging games, but their defense can be pretty difficult to score on outside of a big play or two all that often. So something to keep in mind. I'm kind of with you guys on the same trend here, that if it's 3, I'd probably take the Titans at 3, and maybe they can win the game outright, but probably end up losing by the field goal. If it gets back to 3.5, it's probably where I want to be with the Titans in this one. Ross, where you want to be with the Eagles right now? They finally lose a game, Monday Night Football, against the division rival Commandos, which I choose to call them at this point. But we know how high you've been on the Eagles all year long. It was, I don't want to say it was unrealistic that they were going to go 17-0, but it's very difficult. As I look through the history of teams going undefeated, it doesn't happen all that often. So now they still have a cupcake schedule. They have one loss. Is this kind of the best thing that could have happened for them?
We'll see on Sunday against the Colts, because there's certainly sort of a blueprint out there now for how you want to play against the Eagles. The Texans demonstrated that with Dameon Pierce running very effectively against them, with Jordan Davis, their stud run-stuffing defensive tackle, out. I still think the Eagles have a really good team. I was not expecting them to go undefeated, and I certainly wasn't expecting them, though, to lose at home to a team like the Commanders on Monday Night Football in primetime, but they got their butts kicked. I mean, the Commanders were the better team. The Commanders deserved to win the game. And so now, what do you think the Colts are going to do? What do you think Jeff Saturday, a former offensive lineman, is going to do with Jonathan Taylor as his running back? They're going to try to run the ball right down the Eagles' throat. They better fix it, and they better fix it quick. Everybody knows what will be coming on Sunday. And to make matters worse, the Eagles just lost to, I think, is arguably their most indispensable player when you consider everything he does in both the run game and the pass game and the depth or lack thereof behind him. I'm talking about their tight end, Dallas Goedert. I think he's an elite player. I think he's a top 3 tight end in the NFL. He was number 1 in yards per target, which I'm sure Pam loves. Number 1 yards after the catch, which I'm sure Pam loves. And so now they don't have him. The 2 guys behind him are not even close to what Goddard brings to the table. Be really interesting to see how they try to make up for that huge loss. So they added, what did they add? They added injury to insult, not insult to injury.
Brian, what do you make of the Eagles' chances for the rest of the season?
I don't like the loss of Dallas Goedert. Yes, there's a blueprint on how you play the Eagles, but I actually think this might be the best thing for him. Get the loss out of the way, divisional game. Look, it happened. Now you've got some fuel to add and get back on it. You know, it is very difficult, to go undefeated. That's why I've only seen a couple of teams do it in history. So look, they lost the game. Now let's see how they bounce back. I mean, like Ross said, and we've been saying the whole year, that's a very talented roster top to bottom. The tight end position might be down, but you saw they've got guys all across the board that can make plays. So I'm not too far down on them. I think this might be a good loss, and they'll be able to rally around it.
Pam, you've been dumping the Eagles stock all season long, basically like it's FTX. So are you relishing in the fact that they lose, or have you readjusted your expectations?
I'm relishing because I had a Washington money line ticket last night. So that is how I am speaking my piece. But overall, look, the Eagles, are they a good team? Absolutely. Are the Eagles the best team? Not at all. The pass coverage isn't good enough. The run defense isn't good enough. Washington at one point was 12 of 15 on third downs. The Eagles just don't do enough on early downs. They're allowing 4 or 5 yards in the first down of plays. And if you make mistakes, they had 4 turnovers, you're going to lose games. They played a very easy schedule up until now. Those are winnable games. But then if you make these mistakes, you're going to lose those games. So my piece was having the Washington money line. I'm glad that the 17-0 chatter is all done. Now I'm interested to see how they rebound. But for me, this is a huge, if your defense isn't stepping up the way that it should, if your run game is stopped, well, then what does your passing game look like? And we kind of saw a glimpse of that last night where Jalen Hurts, he looks fine until he doesn't. But that's most quarterbacks under pressure. So I'm just interested to see what happens from here on forward.
The Cowboys are at the 1-loss Vikings after the Cowboys get upended by the Packers, as I mentioned. And the Vikings inexplicably beat the Bills in overtime, which just absolutely blew my mind when I was watching the game. But here we are, and the Vikings just continue to crawl to the very top of the NFC. This game just has a spread that's bouncing around a little bit, but Dallas is currently favored in Minnesota. Is that a trap? Because honestly, what you said last week, Ross, that winning games still actually matters in the NFL, and all Minnesota would have to do to beat the spread is actually just win this game. Hell, they could even lose by a point, and maybe by the time it comes Sunday, they could still cover this spread. So what are we doing here with the Vikings? Why is the line like this?
Well, what's so interesting about it is they're telling us that they think the Cowboys are a decently better team than the Vikings because the game is in Minnesota. So think about that, right? Whatever you want to attribute home field advantage to, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 2.5. I don't know. Minnesota indoors, those people get pretty loud. And then for the Cowboys to still be favored, they're saying that the Cowboys are a decently better team than the Vikings. I don't agree. Certainly not by what I've seen in recent weeks. I have no idea why Dan Quinn only had Micah Parsons rush 8 times against Aaron Rodgers. It feels like at this point, the only person that can prevent Micah Parsons from being Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL is Dan Quinn, his defensive coordinator. How do you only rush that guy 8 times? Makes no sense. I don't understand like the Vikings skepticism, okay? They have probably the best receiver in the NFL.
Yeah.
They have a really good number 2 receiver. They have a top 5 running back, a really good backup running back. They have now probably a top 5 tight end in TJ Hawkinson. They have a top 10 quarterback. Kirk Cousins has been playing like that all year. Offensive line's gotten better. The defense has got, I mean, I'm naming like all of the position. That's like all the positions. They're good.
So I don't think that this is a trap game, but I like what Ross said about the misconception that we have about the Vikings right now. And it's because it stems from these one-score games that they're winning. The difference to me, though, is that the 2021 Vikings, when they're winning by small margin compared to the 2022 Vikings that are winning by a small margin, I think it's head coach. You have Mike Zimmer, who was playing to not lose instead of playing to win. And now you have Kevin O'Connell, who is finding ways to win. So it's a huge upgrade at the coaching position, and it's almost like once Kirk Cousins throws that interception, okay, all the points are going to be scored. They got that mistake out of the way, and now they're just going to go on a roll. So I really don't think that this is a trap line. I think it's more so just evenly matched teams. And Dallas, I really don't like what I'm seeing from the play calling for this since Dak Prescott has made his return. They've kind of moved away from that conservative bomb downfield attempts. They need to stick to the short dink and dunks. It's the boring short game football that's going to win games. And if you try anything further with that, which is what Dallas is doing right now, it's leading to problems. But the problem with the Cowboys right now is that they're the most penalized team in the league, especially on the road. So what could happen is what I envision is we're going to have the same conversation next week of Dallas should have won that game, and because of all the mistakes that were made, penalties, the Vikings found a way to win because they have a better coach.
I think it's interesting, too. Both of these teams are coming off completely different circumstances on the opposite ends of things this last week. You had Green Bay coming back, and shocking Dallas. And then you had, Minnesota coming back and shocking Buffalo. But I still don't get the line. I thought it would open up on the opposite side of things, maybe -1.5, -2 in favor of Minnesota, especially after that win. So I like Minnesota here. I'm going to keep with them to keep winning games, even if they are tight and they aren't pretty. They've been winning games.
Let's get to the other side of the Vikings game from last week with the Buffalo Bills, who blew it. Again, Josh Allen's looking like year 2 Josh Allen with these he's looking like Trevor Lawrence, actually, so far this season. Move the ball down the field, get in super close, turnover. It's happened. It happened against the Packers. It happened against the Jets. And now at least they got away with it in the Packers game because they were up by so much. But this is eventually going to come back to cost you. So that's 3 straight weeks of this happening. We know he has the UCL injury, but apparently he's healthy enough that he's going to play through it. It didn't seem to affect his arm strength at all throughout the course of the game. I thought that he was out after throwing the interception and then tried to make the tackle, and he was just laying on the ground. Turned out he was fine from that too. So what do we make of the Bills when we reassess where they're at right now, Brian? Are they still the elite of the AFC and the NFL, or has Kansas City maybe passed them?
I think Kansas City is closing some ground, but I still think that Buffalo is the class of the NFL. I don't think the margin is as wide as it used to be. The thing that concerns me with Kansas City, and it's nothing to do with Mahomes, obviously, is who's their running back, and the defense every week. The receivers aren't established. They're trying to get Pacheco the ball. I look at Singletary played well. I thought they were trying to kind of maybe, ease Josh Allen with the UCL injury and give the ball a little early. The turnovers, those aren't great, but I look at their team. Jordan Poyer's out. You've got a lot of pieces still missing. But at the end of the day, I still think when you look top to bottom, I think Buffalo is the class of the division, although I do think Kansas City is starting to come up closer.
My concern with the Bills, specifically as it relates to this game, is all the weather reports. We'll see how that shakes out later on in the week, but it's looking like potential really bad weather in Buffalo, including snow. And you've got a Bills team that does not run it very well, other than Josh Allen going against a Browns team that typically does run it really well. That would be the major concern if I'm a Bills. It's weird because you think, oh, Bills, bad weather, that's right up their alley. I don't know if they want that against a team like the Cleveland Browns with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and that offensive line. I think the better weather, the better for the Bills on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And with it looking like there could be all kinds of snow, that gives Cleveland more of a chance. Weather, kind of like turnovers, can be a great equalizer in football.
What do you think, Pam?
I mean, it's Josh Allen is the only concern that I have. He's just in multiple games now. He's looked like his old version of himself, where he's forcing situations. He's kind of like wreaking havoc on the offense. He's just uncontrolled, and he's just making boneheaded mistakes that I thought that we were long past. And now he is back to back games making those boneheaded mistakes again. So it's almost like he's feeling the pressure of I need to be better than the Chiefs. We're making a Super Bowl run. Like whatever it is, it's almost like he's playing with added pressure, and it's turning him into an older version that we thought that we were done with. So that would be my concern with it. But for everything that Ross said, I love that take, and I'm going to be paying attention to that as the week progresses.
I have a question about that, Ross, because you have the experience in playing in this sort of weather. I've noticed a lot of times, a lot of it really, it's not so much snow related. You're always going to remember those like the Colts Bills game when there was 3 feet of snow on the field. Obviously, you can't move in that. But I think that those are the ones that stick out in our minds very often, that if the wind can stay down, which I don't know if it will or not because it's Buffalo, pretty windy place, that sometimes you get a bit of snow on the ground, be it an inch or two, and all of a sudden that dramatically favors the offense because, as I've always kind of tried to think about it, is the offense knows where they're going. The defense doesn't. That you can make guys fall over. I remember a Patriots-Titans game in the snow, but it wasn't a ton of snow, just a little bit of snow in New England. I think they won the game like 59-0. All they did was just throw bombs down the field the entire game, and there was no one around these receivers.
You know what's funny, Pat? I called both those games. I called the Colts-Bills game, and I called the Patriots-Titans game. And you're right. I mean, there's a certain point where there's just so much snow that you can't do anything but run it. But as long as the wind is not a big factor, a little bit of snow does not kill the passing game. And in fact, if there's a little bit of snow on the ground, it can actually help the passing game because it's tough for the pass rushers to really get their footing, to be able to get upfield and get pressure on the quarterback. And the receivers, to your point, they're making those in cuts or out breaking routes. They know where they're going, whereas the defense having to react to it, they are more likely to be slower coming out of their back pedal, coming out of their transition. So you're right about that. We'll just have to see just how bad it is on Sunday.
But you guys are talking about the Bills' lack of rushing offense. Who has least rushing offense in the league right now? That's Miami, and they just ran all over the Cleveland Browns, 200 yards. This is a team that does not run the ball, just made them look like elite runners, and Cleveland could not stop Jeff Wilson. And if Josh Allen is banged up, then he himself is a runner, and they still have Devin Singletary. He's highly efficient, so I would lean to the Browns because of the lack of passing efficiency from Allen right now. But I mean, if there's the snow in the factor and this becomes a run game, I think it is an equalizer, and maybe that 9.5, 8, whatever the line is currently right now, is maybe too much if it becomes a run versus run.
And the only thing that scares me, and it was last week too with the Browns, is that if they get behind, the Browns are in no position to play from behind. So it's like, all right, run the ball. If you can keep the game close and minimize Jacoby Brissett's involvement, as far as throwing the ball downfield, the Browns can stay with pretty much anyone. But the defense, the Browns have been getting gashed. So I'll be interested to see, what they do this weekend in Buffalo. I think Buffalo will be able to establish the run. So if Buffalo gets up early, I don't think they'll have a problem racking up a big lead. It's if the game stays close. I think that's where you'll have some trouble.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked around some of the games, a bit of the spreads, but we need to figure out who we are going to pick this week. Week 11. So it's time to get to pick 'em, brought to you by Mayo Premium. And don't forget to head over to OddsChecker.com and sign up for your very own MyOC Premium account. For less than just $1 a day, you'll have access to our gambling experts, exclusive picks for NFL, MLB, college sports, NHL, UFC, NBA, golf, and so much more. Trying to do better than last week. We were 3-3, but mainly that was thanks to Brian, who was a perfect 2-0. So, Brian, you need to help us pick up the slack here. Rise all tides. Hopefully you can get us going 2-0 again and be an inspiration for a 6-0 week on the pick. So we'll start with you. Who you got?
All right. A lot of pressure now. Hopefully it's not the broadcaster jinx. But look, I'm going to start here with a team. go the New York Giants. I like them -3 against Detroit. And I'm just going to keep it simple as to why. Last week, they played the worst rush defense in the NFL. Saquon Barkley had a field day. They're now getting the number 2 worst run defense, team that gives up the second most rushing yards. So I think they're going to be able to impose their will. Not only that, the Lions don't have a great pass defense, so I think Daniel Jones will be able to get them down the field, with some Wan'Dale Robinson, maybe some deep shots to Darius Slayton. But I expect some heavy dose of Saquon Barkley. I think they get out of there -3.
Pam, we'll go to you, and it seems like you want some totals, not so much some sides.
Yeah, earlier in the week, the sides kind of get me, so I'm going to turn to the totals this week, and I'm going to go with the Chiefs and the Chargers over 50. I think this line is a smidge too low just because the Chargers were shut out in the second half last week against the 49ers. But San Francisco is the best defense in the league, so I'm not going to put too much weight into that. Instead, I'm looking at the Chiefs defense, and in 4 road games, they have the Chiefs offense, and in 4 road games, they have scored 40 points in 3 of those games. And at home, the Chargers defense is allowing 400 yards of offense to Seattle and Jacksonville, and now has to face Mahomes. So he's absolutely going to carve up the secondary. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Isaiah Pacheco, they're going to run up and down the field. And the Chargers will do what they do best, which is convert on third down and score to keep pace. So I like the over Chiefs, Chargers 50.
So if you are a loyal watcher of the show, I love getting 3.5 points. I don't like it. I love it. I feel like it's so valuable to get 3 and the hook. I'm going with the Chicago Bears. They're playing the Falcons. Justin Fields. Look, I know they're not winning that many games, but he is so fun to watch. I mean, watching him against Marcus Mariota will really be something else for everybody that watches this Bears-Falcons game, because Marcus Mariota is rough. I mean, look, they're the 2 most entertaining quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Fields, like 90% good reasons, 10% bad. Mariota, 90% bad reasons, 10% good. I'm going to take Fields in the 3.5 points. I mean, maybe the Falcons win the game, but if they do, what's it by? A field goal? So give me those 3.5. And then I'm almost regretting my other pick as I go back to back with the snake draft here, because while we're recording this, I think every other player on the roster just got hurt. I'm going to take the Rams on the road against the New Orleans Saints. They actually now are getting 4 points because people keep getting injured. They won't have Cooper Kupp. That's a big loss. But I do think they'll have Matthew Stafford back, which is significant. And the Saints are a really poor football team, just got smoked by the Steelers. My guess is they'll make a quarterback change this week and go with Winston. We'll see how much of an impact that has. Give me the Rams getting the points. Probably a toss-up game. Even if the Saints win, probably by a field goal. So I'll take my 3.5, 4. Thank you very much.
To stay in line with what Ross has, taking the Rams, I'm taking the Rams and the Saints under 39 because, as he alluded to, Stafford, he may be back behind center. If he plays, though, he has been far less than productive. He has 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in his last 4 games. He's not looking like his Super Bowl self. And, of course, they may be without wide receiver Cooper Kupp. He is the Rams offense. What does the offense look like without him? Nobody knows. 95% of the snap share, 4th most targets in the league. But the defense is still top 5 for this Rams. Top 5 in defense DVOA. Aaron Donald, he is still wrecking quarterbacks, and you cannot run against this team. So now I'm envisioning the scenario of Aaron Donald against Andy Dalton. 6 interceptions in his last 4 games. But the Saints pass rush is pretty strong too. You have linebacker Demario Davis and defensive end Cam Jordan. This game is going to be low scoring because you're going to have Dalton and Stafford spending more time on the ground than they are throwing passes.
All right, I guess that's me then. So I'll close it out here, and I'm not a big Steelers guy, but I'm going to go ahead here and take the Steelers +5 against Cincinnati. The reason why I thought Cincinnati had a great game against Carolina, but they did that leaning on Joe Mixon, who's been having a terribly inefficient year. They're not going to be able to run the ball the same way that they did against the Panthers on the Steelers. With TJ Watt coming back, he's already in the mix, already made a difference last weekend. So I'll take them +5. I mean, there's still no Jamar Chase, so they're going to have to lean on that pass game. I'm not sure on the status of Minkah Fitzpatrick, but +5, these tight games within conferences or divisions, they're always tricky, so I think +5 is a fair number here.
Well, Ross, you went 0-2 against the spread last week. It's very bad. However, Tuck's teasers, perfect, big winners last week. Who you got for us this time around?
Thank you, Pat. And by the way, I'd like everybody to know I was up 4 units for the week altogether. It's not my fault. Jeff Saturday, who's a friend of mine, lied to me and told all of us that Sam Ellinger from Pam's Longhorns would start. And I thought, great. I know he stinks. I'm glad he's starting. I will lay the points with the Raiders. Then what happened later on in the week? Waller and Renfro go on IR, and then Sunday comes around. As soon as I saw Matt Ryan was starting, I knew that was over. That and the Cowboys up by 2 touchdowns. I'm not over it. I'll never be over it. I don't even remember any bets I win. I only remember the losses, and I never forgive, and I never forget, and I almost forgot the question, but he's asking me about teasers. So now I'm going to tell you my teaser plays for this week because they've been on fire. I'm taking the Niners from -8 down to -2 in Mexico City against the Cardinals. Although it makes me nervous, I'd rather Kyler Murray start for the Cardinals than Colt McCoy with this bet. Colt McCoy, another Texas Longhorn, who's actually pretty good, Pam. He's pretty good, yeah. I mean, he's better moving the offense than Kyler Murray is. Doesn't have nearly the same ability. So I got the Niners down as a teaser leg to -2. I'll still take the Buffalo Bills as a teaser leg down to -2, -2.5. And I don't feel great about this one. But I'm taking the Raiders up to +8.5. The Broncos can't score points. They don't score the football, okay? So if I can get 8.5 points, I mean, the high point for the Broncos, maybe they'll get 13 this week, maybe 17 if Russ gets frisky. So I'll take the 8.5 points with the Raiders. So my 3 teaser legs are Niners, Bills, Raiders.
I like it. Now,
I'm gonna say, okay, I'm in agreement with your teasers, except the Cardinals, maybe surprise upset. I'm calling it because Colt McCoy is definitely undervalued as one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. I trust him a heck of a lot more than I ever would to Sam Ellinger. So I wouldn't be surprised if that teaser leg doesn't work out.
geez, Brian, do you want to split the difference here?
No, look, I liked where he was at. This is Ross's deal, right? We got the Tux teasers here. I'm taking the action on the points, so I'll kind of ride with Russ here.
All right. Well, that was a very efficient, just like Devin Singletary, edition of the Week 11 Huddle presented by OddsChecker. I want to thank Ross, Pam, and Brian for being there. Until next week, I'm Pat Mayo. But before I let you go, I want to tell you about a couple ways to make some free and easy money. First off is a chance to win $500 on us just in time for the holiday season. All you got to do is subscribe to our YouTube page at OddsChecker US, and you're automatically entered to win. If you want a second entry, comment on any recent video with the item at the top of your wish list. And we're feeling generous, so we have another giveaway going. It's a brand new PS5. To enter, go follow our Instagram page at OddsChecker-US, then click on our pinned post with the PS5 on it and like the picture. All that's left is to tag 3 of your friends and you're entered to win. So whether you want $500 or a PS5, OddsChecker is making it come true. So good luck. We'll talk to you next week.